What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.
Good afternoon. We're doing it live right here in the 4 o'clock hour, 790 KBC, doing more in 2024, just like the stock market's been doing, right? Hitting record highs. We're on at 4 in the afternoon. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, Wall Street taking a bit of a breather today. The Dow pulling back for the second day in a row after hitting a record high on Friday. And we've seen a string of record highs lately for both the Dow and the S&P 500, but a bit of a pullback here today with the Dow down just about 100 points. The S&P 500 ended higher by 9 points. And the NASDAQ composite did advance 59 points, snapping a two-day losing streak there. The NASDAQ's been flirting with its first record high in more than 2 years. Hasn't quite made it, though. Stocks have been moving higher lately, led by AI chipmaker NVIDIA, which, did move a bit lower today, down to $3.91 at $7.87 and change. We see the earnings parade continuing in after-hours trading here. Looks like L.A.-based, here's one we haven't talked about in a while, Beyond Meat. Get this, up as much as 103% this afternoon in after-hours trading, following Beyond Meat's quarterly results that included a forecast of gross margins in the mid to high teens for this year. The fake meat maker, Beyond Meat, has had some brutal quarters, but roaring back here this afternoon, sizzling on the Wall Street Grill this afternoon. We'll talk about that here coming up shortly. Among another big winner today, Viking Therapeutics, soaring 121%. Get this, finishing sharply higher after the company announced positive results in a phase 2 trial of a weight loss drug to treat obesity and diabetes. Nearly 9 in 10 patients on the treatment achieved at least 10% weight loss versus 4% on the placebo. Macy's a winner today of about 3.5% on earnings news, beating expectations, and the announcement of a strategy to boost growth that includes closing 150 more stores. And home improvement retailer Lowe's moving higher today by about 2% after a quarterly report showing a beat on profit but saw a drop in sales due to a slowing do-it-yourself demand situation and rough weather in January. Its full-year outlook also disappointed Wall Street analysts. Among the winners today, Bitcoin, get this, above 57,000 again, and just less than 20% now from its record high, last achieved back in November of 2021. Following the rise, we had that so-called crypto winter and even ice age, as they call it. But now Bitcoin's been roaring back along with the other cryptos. Look at Doge at 10 cents. That's another one that we follow here. Taking a look at what's happening with the Bitcoin-related stocks and funds, they've risen as well. In fact, the largest crypto Bitcoin ETF looks like has had a big run-up. We're also watching shares of Intuitive Machines rallying today as that space exploration company's Odysseus moonlander runs out of power on the lunar surface. This was big news last week when the moonlander landed on the moon, the first commercial lander to successfully reach the lunar surface. Had 10 to 20 hours of battery life left. Intuitive Machines said today, the company earlier said the mission would be cut short. The lander unfortunately toppled onto its side during its landing near the moon's south pole last week. Watching the price of oil, still hovering near the highs of the year. Right now, it's $78.42 a barrel. Prices recently getting a lift on expectations for stronger energy demand from China and signs of tighter global supplies. And, of course, we're watching the upheaval in the Middle East and prospects for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Big day in downtown Los Angeles today where business leaders gathered for the annual Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation Economic Forecast. It was released today by the LAEDC's top economist, SHANNON, and she'll be joining me later this hour with the details. And the March 5th election coming up in Los Angeles and other cities, including Beverly Hills, a large field of candidates vying for the 2 seats coming open on the Beverly Hills City Council. Coming up, I'll be speaking with one of those candidates in that race, business owner, gun store owner, and security expert Russell Stewart. But first, on your money, the markets and the economy and the whole works. Joining us live now, investment expert Ken WINANS, money manager and president of WINANS Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, space expert too, by the way, and Forbes magazine contributor. Ken, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Frank, and I'm surprised you're not running for those Beverly Hills seats as well. I mean, you have got the voice for politics, Val. You really do. But I know that none of us want to deal with it right now. But it has been an interesting day. I'm going to talk about it in a moment. I've had a lot of questions from various members of media about the significance of a positive February. And it is true that February, typically after a strong January, can be a bit of a lull. But when you have a strong year, it's not unusual to see January doing exactly what it's doing. And Frank, you've talked about a couple of companies that just knocked the ball out of the park. I'm going to give you another one in a moment, but I mean, the earnings so far look pretty darn good, whether it's on cost containment or it's on revenue growth, but clearly companies have figured out a way to navigate things.
You're live with money manager Ken WINANS, and let's talk about what's going on here with the market hitting record highs, a bit of a breather today, and now a Bitcoin also on the move here, Ken. I don't think you have the laser eyes on yet, but certainly it's gotten our attention here. Bitcoin approaching its all-time high, along with the stock market. The NASDAQ, by the way, not quite hitting that record high yet, and there's been some observations that Bitcoin's correlated with tech stocks and the NASDAQ and all that. But what's your analysis on that?
I'm in that camp, by the way. When I look at, I'm an analyst. I've been doing it a long time. When I'm trying to find those comparisons to crypto in general, the strongest comparison is the way that it compares to primarily the NASDAQ. It's hard to understand why. I think the people in my industry are still trying to figure out where to put crypto. For me personally, I put it in the commodity sector, but it's not a currency. I've said many, many times, the dollar and certainly the euro, the yuan, and the yen, crypto does not act like them. And in many, many ways, it's much more volatile than even currencies in the third world. So again, I think it's much more like the situation with NASDAQ, but there's an old adage on Wall Street, trend is your friend. Crypto's trend is up right now, as the NASDAQ is, and you generally go with it. But Frank, it's interesting when you're talking about trends. One of the things that I think everybody's going to have to start thinking about, and it's just as we play out, and it came out loud and clear to me today as I was running through a lot of the analysis, many, many companies right now, as they are trading right this moment, have hit a year's worth of growth in 6 to 7 weeks. And so the question is, do you take some money off the table, or do you just let your bets ride, so to speak? And I think you have to kind of piecemeal that depending on what company you're looking at. But it's not the time to necessarily turn your back and think we're going back into one of those 1990-style bull markets, because that animal is no longer alive. You have to be a little more cognizant about trying to protect your gains. And I think that certainly everybody in the audience should just take a good look at your portfolio or your 401k. And if it's gone up too far too fast for your comfort level, begin to maybe think about taking some off the table.
They're live with money manager Ken WINANS. And Ken, I know you're a big space fan and collect space memorabilia and even had a museum, right? And want to talk to you more about the space here and this tremendous achievement of Odysseus, the first commercial lander to successfully reach the lunar surface. Everybody cheered that, and unfortunately, this thing toppled onto its side during its landing near the moon's south pole last week. This is a publicly traded company, Intuitive Machines. Looks like it moved higher today. What are your thoughts about this one?
Well, it's interesting. I'll add on top of that, Frank, that the launch vehicle for this was a SpaceX rocket. So you have a private company launch company with a private company lunar lander, and it is really the trend of where we're going from here. I've been asked a lot about this. I don't think people realize that even back in the 60s and 70s, with far less technology, there were a lot of colossal failures. There were things that just didn't work. And in fact, trying to land on a foreign body can be difficult. And when you're talking about landing in an area, the South Pole, we've never landed in before. It can be a very treacherous situation. And I hate to say it's a bit of luck. Sometimes you hit a rough spot. Sometimes you don't. And, in the case of Apollo 11, when Neil Armstrong was piloting it, he saw that the computers were sending him into a pile of rocks. He was smart enough to move it along down the path. Unfortunately, technology is not perfect, and there's times you can land on the rock pile and you flip on your side, and that's probably what happened.
All right, and so far the stock hasn't flipped. It did move higher today. Let me take a look here. LUNR is the ticker symbol on this one, and looks like it's was up 44 cents today to $6.71. And let's see, it's been as high as 25 and change, as low as $2. Any thoughts about that one in particular?
The space business is very volatile, very rough, as it is with just anything in the defense sector. I think it's like anything else. If they can muster up another mission and move forward, and it's successful, that stock could vault back very quickly and move forward. But it's a tough business, Frank. It's just it's a dangerous business. It's a business where you're dealing with a hostile environment beyond imagination, and certainly you deal with whether it's the vacuum of space, the radiation that can bake these spaceships when they're on their way to these places. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've learned from the astronauts. Many of them are close friends of mine, and I know you've met many of them as well. You get a strong appreciation of what you're dealing with, and I commend the group personally for boldly trying to get this to work properly and just shrug off the what happened and move forward. That's all you can really do in the space business. And let's not forget, Southern California was the birthplace of a lot of important areas in aerospace, including the space shuttle. So Southern California especially, it's a proud part of their lineage, and we should always support it.
Certainly, space shuttles were built here. And from beyond imagination to beyond meat, here, Ken, beyond meat getting new attention here, finally coming to life again with a gain of about 100% here after hours on its earnings news. For a while there was that fake meat craze. What about this one?
I have to tell you, every now and then you look at a set of numbers coming out on a company and you're in shock. And these are basically products that are made out of soy and a lot of other agricultural type things. Their cost of product has had to gone up dramatically in the last 2 years. And for them to be able to basically compete against meat products, and I dare say that, cattle has also had one heck of a rise. But my compliments to the management of that company that they clearly hedge their cost well. They're producing a product. People are getting back into the idea of healthy food. And they're also realizing, too, I think that, we talk about shrinkflation. I think a lot of it, if you really dug into the numbers, is that it's probably you get a thicker hamburger patty with Beyond Meat right now than you literally do with a regular hamburger patty, and that's strictly because of cost. And I think that might be playing part of it. People are conscious about what they're spending on food, and clearly this group has figured out a way to come back into the markets.
On the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast, co-hosts David Green and Rob Abasolo interview real estate investors and entrepreneurs about successes, failures, and hard-earned lessons. Joined by author Dave Meyer,
who wrote a book.
I did write a book.
It seems like you're coming out with a book every 4 minutes.
You are one to talk. You've released 2 books this year. I've done half as many as you.
It is more about strategy than it is about just finding whatever the new buzzword happens to be.
Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Strong.
All right, let's get to some real meat now. In fact, you asked, where's the beef? Wendy's making news today. You just reminded me, this is interesting here. Big change coming to Wendy's. They're set to test surge pricing like Uber and Lyft. When the demand is high, they charge higher prices. So the cost of your burger would change depending on the time of day. This in response, obviously, to inflation as well. Have you seen this? But Wendy's, which, by the way, the second largest burger chain with 6,000 locations, announced that starting next year, menu prices will fluctuate during the busiest times of the day in response to inflation and probably motivated by profits, too. What's your reaction to that news here today?
I know that people in this generation are probably shocked to hear this. This is part of the playbook of the 1970s. I am not kidding you. Wendy's was around back then. McDonald's was around back then. Burger King was around back then. These chains have been around for a very, very long time. And, they basically are dusting off what worked before as they grasp with what, just the cost of things. The other thing that's really beginning to hit chains more and more is the cost of rent. They are paying a lot more in rent and property taxes now associated, or just facility charges on their facility. So they're dealing with a lot of this. And, I would say that I wouldn't be surprised if Starbucks throws their hat in the ring too, and probably Pete's and anybody else who's in this business. Yes, I mean, they're trying to figure a way to make more money when it's more convenient for people. Unfortunately, here's the problem. It did not work well in the 70s. People just simply stopped going there for lunch. So I would caution to be very careful. But, I mean, again, these are inflationary times. And when inflation is eating into the bottom line, especially when you look at what happened where, basically cost of fast food laborers that particularly were targeted to be raised, this is their response. And so every time government comes up with an idea, unfortunately, you have this kind of thinking that carries it forward. At the end of the day, we, the consumers, are the ones who suffer.
Speaking of the consumer, looks like consumer confidence took a hit this month after hitting a 6-month high in January. We also got new readings on real estate. Looks like home prices in the 20 largest metro areas achieved record highs in December. That's the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Home Price Index, which is a month or two behind. Today we got the December reading. It's 11th straight monthly increase in the index, by the way. And orders for durable goods dropped by 6.1%. That was a sharper than expected drop. And now we're going to be getting a new reading on inflation this weekend. What do you think that's going to look like?
Well, it's interesting. Let me take it one step at a time with everything. Let me start with the good news first. Real estate. All of us that, own a piece of property anywhere in California, there's some good news. I think that because we have stabilized the interest rate scenario, the mortgage companies and banks and the hard money lenders are a lot more comfortable going out there now and basically helping buyers and sellers facilitate transactions. I think this is going to be a very good housing market. And Frank, and by the way I look at it, I always look at how stock prices, when I look at the big three home builders that I primarily monitor, which are Pulte, Lennar, and Toll Brothers, they're all doing well right now. And it's contrary to public opinion, but it tells me that they're moving forward. I had a pleasant surprise. I mean, we talked about some other big winners today. A company that is involved in the building area, which is Sterling Infrastructure. Its stock, same thing. Earnings took off. Stock was up 25% today. So again, I think that real estate, and I will continue to reiterate, if there's an area in everybody's portfolios where they are soft, I think they have way too underexposed themselves to what could be a pretty nice boom in real estate. Okay, so we have that going on, and that's positive. But everything else you just rattled off, which is dealing with inflation. And again, we have to have a little bit of a lesson here. We had the commodity push that pushed this all. This is all tied to COVID and government reaction, too much money going into the system at the wrong time. We can all blame that. But now it's about wages. And whether it's fast food chains or it's going in these other areas, or we're talking about what's happening in retail. In a moment, I'll bring up about what happened with Macy's. You're having companies realizing that if they cannot push that cost to the consumer or the user of their products, they have to make cutbacks. And so you see companies doing it on either or. And unfortunately, we're going to see this continue to play out. I do think it's going to become an election issue at all levels, state and federal and local elections. And it should be. I mean, this is something that, I think I would love to have a politician actually admit they screwed up. They printed too much money at the wrong time. They didn't pay attention to history, and now we're paying the price, and we will be for quite a while. But you're never going to get any of them to fess up.
All right, briefly on Macy's closing more stores and did beat on earnings. What are your thoughts about Macy's and the retailers here?
I'll tell you what, if you want evidence of what's happening in California versus our surrounding states, take a look at the list where Macy's closing stores. They're closing the Union Square store in San Francisco. That would be like, closing the major stores in New York. Where are they not closing stores, at least according to when I read the list? Nevada, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Phoenix. Those stores aren't closing. They're closing stores in areas where the costs are too high, there's too much government interference. So again, I think we have a telltale sign of what's really going on in the economy when retail is the canary in the coal mine, and it's telling you what's going on, and it's a shame because Macy's has been around for well over 100 years and it's gone through its ups and downs, but that tells you everything you need to know about what's going on in California.
All right, Ken, wish we had more time, but we'll have to stop there. Look forward to speaking with you again as soon as possible. That is Money Manager Ken Winans, Money Manager and President of Winans Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, also Forbes magazine contributor, and the list goes on. Ken, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Good night now.
Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any other kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and if needed, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident right now. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Dr. Jordan Peterson to the YouTube Theater May 15th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, and right now caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Mixed finish to the day on Wall Street. The Dow pulling back nearly 100 points, down 97 at 38,972, down for the past couple of sessions, coming off the record high we hit on Friday. The S&P 500 up 9, still hovering near its all-time high at 5,078. The Nasdaq moved higher by 59 points at 16,035. It's still flirting with an all-time high last seen in 2021. The yield in the 10-year note now 4.31%. Crypto's coming back to life now. We see Bitcoin up about $20 at $57,006. And Ethereum down 4 at $3,245. Doge now at 10 cents. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC, doing it live and doing more in 2024. Live in the 4 o'clock hour here, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast. KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Wendy's making news today. The restaurant chain confirming it'll start testing so-called surge pricing sometime next year. This is where their menu items could get more expensive at popular times of the day. Something to look forward to as you wait in that drive-through line. The concept, according to the New York Times and New York Post and other sources, is not new and is already happening in other industries. And Wendy's, the nation's number 2 burger chain in sales. Company leadership looking for more with plans to capitalize on times when hunger strikes hardest. We saw Wendy's stock pull back 9 cents today to $18.11 a share. Well, the March 5th election, in case you hadn't heard, coming up in Los Angeles and other cities here in Southern California, including Beverly Hills, a large field of candidates vying for the 2 seats coming up on the Beverly Hills City Council. Joining us live now, one of the candidates in that race, business owner of Beverly Hills Guns and Force Protection Agency, security expert Russell Stewart. Russell Stewart, thanks for coming to the line, and take it from the top and tell us why you should be on the Beverly Hills City Council.
Well, Fran, thanks so much for having me back. Again, it's been a while. Well, you know, I come from a very different background. I didn't come up through the ranks of the school system or, the school board or different commissions in the city. I'm just a small business owner. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm someone with a public safety background. It's been my entire career. Like you said, I own Force Protection Agency, a very prominent security business in Beverly Hills that we've traveled throughout the world with major celebrities. I started Beverly Hills Guns 5 years ago to allow citizens of our city and the surrounding areas to understand their Second Amendment rights and be able to protect themselves, especially through the pandemic. And now we're going to see all of those things from 4 years coming back again, and including the 2 subway train stations that are coming first next year and then one in a few years from now onto Rodeo Drive. And I just believe that my public safety background and my business background just makes me a bit more unique than the other candidates who are running.
And certainly you're also focused on safety and security with crime, a big issue. And certainly Beverly Hills does command a tremendous amount of respect, the way crime is still taken seriously, certainly within Beverly Hills under the current police chief.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
We're going into Vanderpump Rules. Easton, you told me that Raquel is a little nervous. She talks about it on Rachel Goes Rogue, and she's a little nervous for her podcast to be airing while season 11 is airing. Let me tell you something. She should have come back to the show. It would have been very different than what she thinks it would have been. She shot herself in the foot. She's not the brightest bulb. We all know this.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.
Well, what about the issue of crime, and how would you keep Beverly Hills safe?
Well, I think crime is the number one topic on everyone's mind. I think a lot of small businesses have moved out. People are second-guessing themselves when they want to move into the city. I think our chief, Mark Stainbrook, has done a fantastic job, but I think he needs to continually have the support of the council for more funding, more unique ideas about funding, and just someone who will always have the support from the council. And not to say that they haven't had that in the past, but moving forward, as we have greater and greater challenges, they need to have a council that is 1,000% behind them, and I'm definitely going to be one of those people.
All right, and on the business front, of course, rent's still very high, cost of living for just about everything very high these days. How would you attract more business to the area?
Well, we definitely need to be looking at public-private partnerships. It is very, very expensive to do business in the city, and to pay these high rents right off the bat where you might not have the business that's coming in. We need to be looking at partnerships, at profit sharing, definitely looking at lower taxes for new businesses, lower regulatory fees, and just making it easier because, again, once we have that traffic back because we've got new and innovative new businesses here, I definitely know that those businesses are going to flourish, and it's going to draw more and more companies to come into our incredible town.
Anything else you'd like to mention? What are you hearing from the constituents out there about the other big issues facing the city?
Well, I think the housing element is obviously a massive one. Without having a housing element passed by the state of California, the builder's remedy is a massive problem for us, which allows for these rogue developments to get into the pipeline, which I know that there are several, and that's really concerning residents because they want to keep the small village feel of our city, but these projects are massive, some going over 20 stories high. So getting the housing element passed, and and our schools, we're having bullying issues, we're having anti-Semitic attack issues, and really focusing on making sure that we have the right staff at our schools, keep more cops on the street. Our private security teams are doing fantastic. Safety, pro-business, pro-schools, that's what I'm all about.
Russell Stewart, candidate for Beverly Hills City Council, business owner of Beverly Hills Guns and Force Protection Agency. Security expert Russell Stewart, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Frank. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. And this is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. We're watching what's happening in the commercial real estate world, and we'll be speaking in just a moment to Shannon Sedgwick, the top economist at the LAEDC, who released the LAEDC economic forecast today for Los Angeles. Business and civic leaders gathered today for that big event in downtown Los Angeles. We did see one report today from Goldman Sachs related to commercial real estate, and we also talked about this with top people in commercial real estate here on a regular basis on this program. They say carnage in the office sector isn't yet bad enough to spur more housing development. Older office buildings still need to drop about 50% in price to make turning former workplaces into homes feasible for developers, according to a team of economic researchers led by Jan Hatzius from Goldman Sachs. This is Mottek On Money, 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Big day in downtown Los Angeles with the release of the most prestigious economic forecast of this region, and that is the one that's put out by the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, the LAEDC. And with me now is economist Shannon Sedgwick, who's senior director of the LAEDC's Applied Economic Center. Shannon, take it from the top and tell us about your economic forecast for 2024.
Hi, yes. So as we were putting together our forecast this year, we're entering a period of slow economic growth. And as we were pulling all the numbers and the data together, we really started to see that past is prologue. And so a lot of the old lingering challenges that were present in our economy before the pandemic and all of its disruption took place, they're coming back to the forefront. And so in our forecast, we're identifying the period of slow growth over the next 2 years, but really flagging three main threats to economic growth moving forward, including regional population decline, higher cost of doing business, and our housing affordability crisis here.
So those are three pretty big challenges. And of course, all of last year, everyone was expecting a recession, which did not show up. Are we going to be lucky again this year?
Well, so far, so good. We seem to have achieved a soft landing. A lot changes, and it changes quickly. And so there's no guarantee that we won't face one in the future. But right now, we're not forecasting that we will. So we think, we aren't dipping negative, but we are kind of flatlining in terms of growth over the next 2 years.
One thing that's coming as a surprise, or maybe not so, for anyone trying to afford rent these days, is the population is declining, for the first time basically in history here, right? What are you finding about the exodus here because of the cost of living?
Yeah, well, the cost of living has been pushing people and businesses out. Some of the higher income earners are also starting to leave, and that poses challenges because of the progressive nature of our tax system. So, about 50% of tax revenue was basically received by the top 1% of income earners. And so you're seeing some of the higher income earners leave as well. Traditionally, people were leaving, they are, some of them moving to out of state, but some of them are also moving just to other parts of California that are affordable. And so traditionally, you were seeing a lot of the middle class leave and lower income households that just couldn't make it here in Los Angeles County. But over the last 2 years, you're seeing kind of the demographics of migration change a little bit. And so we saw over the last 2 years, we lost about 75,000 college grads. And so those are individuals with a bachelor's degree or higher. So that represents a shift from what we've been seeing.
So we're seeing a brain drain as well. One thing that may come as a surprise, the face of homelessness is changing. Nowadays, you have entire families becoming homeless. You have people who have jobs and cars becoming homeless because they just simply cannot afford the rent. What do you see ahead on that front? Is affordable housing on the horizon at all?
So it's a priority because we know as a region the challenges that people not being able to afford housing really present. So it's not just the residents, but it's also makes it harder for businesses who now have to pay higher wages to respond to the higher cost of housing and the higher cost of living out here. And so in terms of affordable housing, it has to be a main priority and a strategy. And so there are some opportunities to take some upcoming investment that's coming into our region from federal and state sources and see about how we can deliberately invest that in disinvested communities to prepare them in terms of their infrastructure to be able to build out some of these affordable housing communities. And then you're also seeing some of the movement happening at the city level where they're trying to embrace and accelerate adaptive reuse as a way of filling some of our vacant office spaces and having some building preservation occur as well.
Right, that's a big issue right now, commercial real estate and the slow return to the office and so-called see-through buildings out there. What about converting more office towers, maybe that graffiti tower in the heart of downtown LA, into some sort of housing. How realistic is that? And do you see any movement in that direction here?
Yeah, so we do know, when you're looking at different buildings for adaptive reuse, there are certain types that are easier to convert than others, and there is a cost associated because these buildings weren't designed with the idea of having a bathroom in every unit, and so there are challenges and some cost premiums associated with that. But as we move forward and that commercial real estate market adjusts and prices come down, it might make it more feasible to move forward. And so we do know of a few, the names escape me right now, but we do know of a few buildings that are slated for some adaptive reuse projects in the city moving forward as a result of them really actively engaging developers into this adaptive reuse space.
All right. So bottom line for us, so what do you see for this economy? What kind of growth percentage do you see? What kind of job picture do you see? And overall, what do you see for this economy?
Yeah, so, we still have high interest rates and that really cools the economy overall. And so when we're looking at our projections over the next 2 years, we're seeing really slow economic growth, around 1%. In terms of job growth as well, we're not seeing or predicting a lot of net new employment happening, and part of that is because of the environment. So as you're facing these higher interest rates, it makes borrowing money more expensive. Businesses are putting some of their expansion plans on hold or waiting to see what happens, and so that eventually starts translating into cooling employment growth, cooling economic growth. We're really flagging population decline and its impact that it has on our labor forces being a real kind of key focus that we want everyone to keep in mind because of those three factors of economic growth, right? So if we know that based on all the projections and the silver tsunami, the migration of residents out of the county, we know that there's a potential for a reduced labor force, potential for some labor shortages coming up, right? And that can drag down economic growth and bog it down. So we're highlighting that because now is the time to start developing strategies and programs to focus on those other two factors of capital investment and also technology, which is really made possible through innovation. So, we need to catalyze innovation, we need to catalyze entrepreneurship, and we need to support the businesses that are here so that they can make these large-scale investments so that we add more stability back into our economy in the longer term and not have to worry about where we stand in terms of economic growth because of our declining population.
Mm-hmm. One difference between last year and this year, we had the Taylor Swift concert, so it looks like we need her back, right?
We need her back, and Beyonce.
Right, absolutely. Shannon, thank you very much for that comprehensive update on the Los Angeles economy, and congratulations to you and your team for another great event here. That is economist Shannon Sedgwick, Senior Director of the LAEDC's Applied Economics Division here at the LAEDC, the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. This just in, Starbucks and the union organizing its workers say they have agreed to begin talks with the aim of reaching labor deals. This announcement a breakthrough for the two sides, which have been at odds since Workers United first organized baristas at a Starbucks in upstate New York in late 2021. The Dow coming in for a closing loss of nearly 100 today. The S&P 500 up 9, NASDAQ up 59 points. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show.
Laird Hamilton, welcome to the show, man.
The truth about a good surfer is ultimately that you understand waves. You're actually a wave reader. I can go to the beach, we're watching a wave come in, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that guy's going to crash.
Is that intuition or is that learned?
Yes, the learn becomes intuition. When you have that much volume of experience, it goes into the unconscious.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.